It was a bright, sunny afternoon in a quiet little neighborhood. The sun was shining high in the sky, making everything look happy and warm. The grass on every lawn was cut just right, like a big green carpet. The mailboxes stood in a neat row, all shiny and clean, sparkling under the sunlight. And right there, on Jake Miller's porch, sat one very special package. It wasn't a big package, but it was important. Super important. You'll see why soon. Jake Miller was a regular guy. Nothing fancy about him. He wasn't loud or wild or crazy. He was just Jake. He had a job where he worked all day, fixing cars at a little shop down the road. He liked his job. It kept him busy, and he was good at it. When he wasn't working, he stayed home, maybe playing video games or watching TV. He never bothered anybody. Never yelled at the kids riding bikes. Never complained about noisy dogs barking. Jake was the kind of guy who just minded his own business. Quiet. Nice. Normal. But that package? Oh, it was a big deal to Jake. He'd been waiting for it all week. Every day, he checked his phone to see where it was. Is it here yet? Is it coming today? He'd whisper to himself. And finally, it showed up. Plopped right on his porch like a little present just for him. Jake didn't know it yet, but that package was about to change everything. Not just for him, but for someone else too. Someone sneaky. Someone watching. Now, let's talk about that someone. Her name was Karen. Yep, that kind of Karen. You know what I mean, right? The kind of person who acts like she's the boss of everything and everybody. In this neighborhood, Karen was the queen. Well, she thought she was the queen. She was part of something called the HOA. That's short for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood like, don't paint your house purple, or keep your trash cans hidden. Stuff like that. Most people didn't mind the HOA. They just followed the rules and went on with their day. But Karen? She didn't just follow the rules. She loved the rules. She loved them so much, she made sure everybody else followed them too. Even if they didn't want to. Karen wasn't tall or big, but she acted like she was 10 feet tall. She had short hair that she dyed a funny color kind of orangey yellow, like a carrot mixed with a lemon. She wore bright clothes, like pink sweatshirts or loud flowery dresses. And she walked around the neighborhood with her head up high, like she was on a stage and everyone was clapping for her. Strutting. That's the word. She strutted around like she owned the whole street. Maybe even the whole world. She was nosy too. Super nosy. If you got a new car, Karen would peek out her window and stare. If you planted flowers, she'd march over and say, those are too red. Plant something else. If your dog barked one time, just one little woof, Karen would call your house and complain. Dogs should be quiet, she'd say in her bossy voice. This is a nice neighborhood. Everyone knew Karen. Everyone saw her watching. And most people just rolled their eyes and tried to stay out of her way. That sunny afternoon, though, Karen wasn't just watching the flowers or the dogs. Nope. She was watching Jake's porch. She stood by her window, peeking through the curtains. Her eyes locked onto that package. It wasn't huge, but it looked interesting. A brown box with some tape on it. Nothing fancy. But to Karen, it was like a mystery waiting to be solved. What's in there? She mumbled to herself. Why does Jake need that? Who sent it? Her brain buzzed with questions. Nosy questions. Sneaky questions. Jake didn't know Karen was spying. He was still at work, fixing a car with a flat tire. He had no idea his package was sitting there, all alone, with Karen's eyes glued to it. He didn't know she was already making a plan. A bad plan. A plan that would make this sunny day turn into something wild. Something nobody in the neighborhood expected. See, Karen wasn't just nosy. She was bossy too. And she had this idea in her head that she was in charge of everything. Not just the grass or the mailboxes, but everything. Even other people's stuff. If I don't like it, it doesn't belong here, she'd say to herself. And that package? She didn't like it. Not one bit. It bugged her. Why? Who knows? Maybe it looked too new. Maybe it wasn't her package, and that made her mad. Or maybe she just wanted to feel important. Whatever the reason, Karen decided that package was a problem. And she was going to fix it. But here's the thing, Jake wasn't as boring as Karen thought. Sure, he was quiet. Sure, he didn't make a fuss. But Jake was smart. Really smart. He didn't just sit around and let things happen. He had tricks up his sleeve, tricks Karen didn't see coming. She thought he was just some regular guy who wouldn't fight back. Oh, how wrong she was. That package wasn't just a box to Jake. It was something he cared about. Something he worked hard for. And if someone messed with it? Well, Jake wasn't going to just shrug and say, oh well. Nope. He had a plan too. A better plan than Karen's. Let's rewind a little. Back to that porch. The sun was still shining, birds were chirping, and everything seemed perfect. Jake's house was small but nice. White paint, a little red door, and a porch just big enough for a chair and a table. That's where the package sat, right by the door. It had Jake's name on it in big black letters, Jake Miller. Next to his name was a sticker that said fragile. That means breakable. Whatever was inside, it was special. Delicate. Something Jake didn't want messed up. Across the street, Karen's house was bigger. Fancier. She had a giant rose bush out front, bright pink roses that she bragged about all the time. Best roses in the neighborhood, she'd say to anyone who'd listen. Her mailbox was gold, not silver like everyone else's. She thought it made her look rich. Important. Better than everybody. And from her big front window, she could see everything. Jake's porch. The street. The kids playing ball. Everything. That window was like her spy tower. And right now, all she cared about was that little brown box. Karen didn't know what was in it. Could be a toy. Could be a book. Could be something boring like socks. But she didn't care. To her, it was a secret. And Karen hated secrets unless they were hers. Jake doesn't need that, she said under her breath. He's just a car guy. What's he ordering fancy stuff for? She didn't like Jake much. He was too quiet for her. Too normal. In her mind, quiet people were sneaky. Hiding something. And that package? It was proof. Proof Jake was up to no good. At least, that's what she told herself. The truth? Jake wasn't sneaky at all. He was just excited. That package had something he'd wanted for months. A gaming console. You know, one of those cool machines you hook up to your TV to play video games. It wasn't cheap. Jake had saved his money, little by little, from every paycheck. No fancy dinners. No new shoes. Just saving, saving, saving. And now it was here. His reward for all that hard work. He couldn't wait to get home, rip it open, and play. He'd even told his buddy at work, man, tonight's gonna be awesome. But Karen didn't know any of that. She didn't care about Jake's hard work or his excitement. All she saw was a box she didn't control. A box that didn't belong to her. And that made her itchy. Restless. Like she had to do something about it. She tapped her fingers on the windowsill. She squinted her eyes. She made up her mind. That box doesn't belong there, she whispered. I'll take care of it. Meanwhile, Jake was still at the car shop, wiping grease off his hands. The clock said 4 p.m. One more hour, and he'd be home. One more hour, and he'd see his package. He smiled just thinking about it. He had no clue Karen was plotting. No clue his sunny day was about to get stormy. No clue that this little brown box was going to start a big adventure. The neighborhood stayed quiet. Kids rode their bikes down the street, laughing and shouting. A dog barked somewhere far away. The mailman waved as he drove off in his little white truck. Everything seemed normal. Perfect. But it wasn't. Not with Karen around. She was like a tornado waiting to spin. And Jake's package? It was right in her path. So, what do you think Karen did next? Did she leave it alone? Did she call Jake and ask about it? Or did she do something crazy? Stick around, because this story's about to get good. Really good. You won't believe what happens next. Trust me, it's wild. Jake was so excited about his package. It wasn't just any package. It was something really special, a fancy new gaming console. You know, one of those cool machines you plug into your TV to play awesome video games. It had bright buttons and could play the best games with fast cars and brave heroes. Jake had wanted it for a long, long time. Months. He didn't just go to the store and buy it quick. Nope. He saved up for it. Every week, he took a little bit of his money from fixing cars at his job and put it away. No candy. No movies. Just saving, saving, saving. It was hard, but Jake didn't mind because he knew it would be worth it. He watched that package like a hawk. A hawk is a bird that stares at stuff from way up in the sky, waiting to swoop down. That's how Jake was with his tracking app on his phone. Every day, he'd check it. Where's my package now? Is it close? He'd say to himself. He'd sit at lunch, eating a sandwich, and peek at his phone. Oh, it's in the next town, he'd whisper. Then, it's on the truck. Finally, one sunny day, he got the best message ever, delivered. His package was on his porch. Right there, waiting for him. When he saw that, Jake grinned so big his face almost hurt. He couldn't wait to get home from work and open it. All day at the car shop, he was happy. He fixed a tire, wiped some oil off his hands, and kept smiling. Tonight's gonna be great, he told his buddy, Tom. I'm gonna play that new racing game. Tom laughed and said, lucky you, man. Jake nodded. He could already picture it, sitting on his couch, controller in hand, zooming through a game world. The clock moved slow, but finally, it was time to go home. He grabbed his jacket, hopped in his old blue truck, and drove back to his little house with the red door. His heart was bouncing with excitement. But when he got there, oh no! Big trouble. He parked his truck, jumped out, and ran to his porch. He looked down, ready to see his package, and nothing. It was gone. Poof. Like magic, but bad magic. The porch was empty. No brown box. No fragile sticker. Just bare wood staring back at him. Jake blinked. He rubbed his eyes. Wait, what? He said out loud. His heart, which was so happy a minute ago, sank down to his toes. It felt heavy, like a big rock was sitting in his chest. Where was his package? He looked around under the chair, behind the table. Nothing. It was really, truly gone. Jake took a deep breath. Okay, he told himself. Don't freak out. Maybe it's somewhere else. He tried to stay calm, even though his hands were shaking a little. He walked down his steps and looked up and down the street. The neighborhood was quiet. The sun was still up, making the lawns glow green. Kids were riding bikes a few houses away, laughing. A squirrel ran across the road with a nut in its mouth. Everything seemed normal except Jake's package was missing. That wasn't normal at all. He decided to ask around. Maybe someone saw something. He walked to his neighbor on the left, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson was old, with white hair and glasses. He was sweeping his driveway. Hey, Mr. Thompson, Jake said, trying to sound chill. Did you see a package on my porch today? Mr. Thompson stopped sweeping and scratched his head. He said. Nope, didn't see anything. Been out here all afternoon, though. Sorry, Jake. Jake nodded. Thanks anyway, he said, and walked back. Next, he tried Mrs. Garcia on the right. She was nice, always baking cookies for people. She was outside picking weeds from her flowers. Hi, Mrs. Garcia, Jake called. Did you see my package today? It was on my porch. Mrs. Garcia stood up and wiped her hands on her apron. Oh, Jake, I don't think so, she said. I was inside most of the day. Did it get lost? Jake shrugged. I hope not, he said. Thanks, though. She smiled. Good luck finding it. Jake waved and turned away, feeling worse. Nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anything. Jake's stomach started to twist. This wasn't good. That gaming console wasn't cheap. It was his big treat, his reward. And now it was gone? He kicked a pebble on the sidewalk, frustrated. Maybe the mail guy took it back, he thought. But no, that didn't make sense. His phone said delivered. It was here. It was here. So where did it go? That's when he saw her. Karen. Across the street, standing in front of her big house with the gold mailbox. She was watering her roses, those bright pink roses she loved showing off. She had a hose in her hand, spraying water in little arcs. But what caught Jake's eye wasn't the roses or the water. It was her face. Karen had a smirk. A sneaky, smug little smirk, like she knew something he didn't. Her eyes flicked up at him for a second, then back down to her flowers. That smirk made Jake's skin itch. Something about it felt wrong. Jake took a step toward her. He didn't want to fight. He wasn't mad yet. He just wanted answers. So he called out, nice and polite, like he always was. Hey, Karen. His voice was loud enough to carry across the street. You see my package today? He stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. Hoping. Karen didn't even turn around right away. She kept watering her roses, like Jake wasn't even worth looking at. The water splashed on the petals, dripping down to the dirt. Finally, after what felt like forever, she glanced over her shoulder. Just a tiny peek. Oh, she said, her voice sharp and high. You mean that ugly box? She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then she smirked again. Looked like trash to me. Maybe the garbage truck took it? Jake froze. Her words hit him like a slap. Ugly box? Trash? Garbage truck? What was she talking about? His package wasn't trash. It was brand new, taped up tight, with his name on it. And the garbage truck didn't come today, it came on Fridays, and this was Tuesday. Jake's brain spun. He stared at Karen, trying to figure her out. She turned back to her roses, acting like she just solved all his problems. Like she was doing him a favor by even talking to him. But Jake wasn't dumb. He knew something was off. Way off. That package didn't just disappear. Packages don't grow legs and walk away. And the way Karen said it looked like trash to me, it wasn't nice. It wasn't helpful. It was mean. Sharp. Like she wanted to make him feel small. Her tone stung, worse than a bee. And that smirk? It stayed on her face, like she was laughing at him inside her head. Jake's gut twisted harder. It wasn't just his heart sinking now, it was his stomach too. Something wasn't right. He could feel it, deep down, like when you know a storm's coming even if the sky's still clear. He looked at Karen again. She was spraying her roses, humming a little tune, acting all innocent. But Jake wasn't buying it. That package didn't go to the garbage. It didn't get lost. Someone took it. And Karen, she was acting way too weird. He thought about his gaming console. All those months of saving. All those days of waiting. He pictured it sitting in that box, ready for him to open, and now it was gone. His hands balled into fists, but he didn't yell. Not yet. Jake was calm. Jake was smart. He took a slow breath and watched Karen. Her hose sprayed water. Her smirk stayed put. And Jake's mind started racing. Karen's attitude was bad. Really bad. It wasn't just her words, it was how she said them. Like she didn't care. Like she was better than him. Jake sniffed the air, half joking to himself that her attitude stank worse than her fancy perfume. She always wore too much of that stuff, smelled like flowers mixed with old candy. It made your nose wrinkle. But right now, her smirk and her sharp voice were worse than any smell. They made Jake mad. Quiet mad. The kind of mad that sits in your chest and waits. He didn't say anything else. Not yet. He just stood there, staring across the street. Karen kept watering, pretending he wasn't there. But Jake wasn't done. He wasn't going to let this go. That package was his. He worked for it. And if Karen knew something, if she did something, he was going to find out. One way or another. The sun started dipping lower, turning the sky orange. The kids on bikes rode home. The squirrel disappeared. The neighborhood got quieter. But the tension? Oh, it was growing. Between Jake and Karen, something was brewing. Something big. Something messy. Jake didn't know it yet, but this was just the start. The calm before the storm. And Karen? She had no idea what was coming her way. The sun kept sinking, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The air got cooler, and a little breeze rustled the leaves on the trees. Jake stood on his side of the street, still staring at Karen. His empty porch felt like a big, silent question mark behind him. Where was his package? His gaming console? He couldn't stop thinking about it. That box wasn't just stuff to him, it was his hard work, his patience, his fun night gone missing. And Karen's weird answer kept bouncing around in his head, looked like trash to me. Maybe the garbage truck took it? Trash. Garbage. No way. Jake's eyes narrowed. He watched Karen twist the hose nozzle, making the water spray harder on her roses. She was so calm. Too calm. Like she didn't care that his package was gone. Most people would say, "Oh no, that's awful," or "I'll help you look." But not Karen. She just smirked and shrugged, like it was no big deal. That wasn't normal. That wasn't nice. Jake's gut kept whispering to him, she knows something. She's hiding something. He crossed his arms and leaned against his truck, still parked in the driveway. He wasn't going anywhere yet. He wanted to watch her. Study her. Figure her out. Karen wasn't his favorite person, nobody's favorite, really, but he'd never thought she'd be this mean. Nosy. Sure. Bossy. Oh yeah. But a thief? That was a whole new level. Could she really have taken his package? Jake didn't want to believe it. Not yet. But that smirk on her face, it was like a clue. A big, flashing sign that said, trouble. Karen kept watering her roses, moving the hose from bush to bush. She hummed louder now, some silly little song Jake didn't know. Her pink sweatshirt glowed under the fading sunlight, and her gold mailbox sparkled like it was showing off. Everything about her screamed, "I'm important." But Jake wasn't impressed. He was annoyed. And worried. He glanced back at his porch one more time, just to be sure. Nope. Still empty. No package hiding in the shadows. No box tucked behind the chair. It was really gone, and Karen was the only one acting strange. "Hey, Karen." Jake called again, a little louder this time. He stepped off the curb and walked a few steps closer. Not too close, just enough to make her hear him. "You sure you didn't see anything?" "It was a brown box, right by my door. Had my name on it." Karen stopped humming. She turned her head just a tiny bit, barely looking at him. Her smirk stayed put, like it was glued to her face. "I told you," she said, her voice sharp like a knife. "It looked like junk. I didn't see it long. Garbage truck probably grabbed it." She flicked her wrist, spraying water in a big circle, and turned away again. Like that was that. Conversation over. Jake's jaw tightened. Garbage truck again? That didn't add up. He knew the garbage schedule, everybody did. Trash day was Friday. Today was Tuesday. No big green truck had rumbled down the street. No loud beeps or clanging bins. The street had been quiet all day, except for the kids and their bikes. Karen's story was flimsy. Thin. Like a paper towel that rips when you pull it. Jake wasn't buying it. Not one bit. He took another step closer, his sneakers crunching on the pavement. "Karen," he said, keeping his voice steady, "the garbage doesn't come today. It's Tuesday. You sure that's what happened?" He wasn't yelling. He wasn't mad, at least, not loud mad. But he was pushing now. Testing her. Seeing if she'd trip over her own words. Karen's shoulders stiffened. Just a little, but Jake saw it. She didn't like that question. She turned off the hose with a quick twist, and water dripped onto the ground, making a puddle by her feet. She finally faced him, her eyes narrow and her lips tight. "Look, Jake," she snapped, "I don't keep track of your junk. I've got better things to do. Maybe you should have been home to grab it." Her voice was loud now, sharp enough to cut through the quiet street. Then she turned back to her roses, like he wasn't even worth her time. Jake blinked. Better things to do? That stung. His package wasn't junk, it was his gaming console. And he couldn't be home, he was at work, fixing cars, earning money. Like normal people do. Karen acted like it was his fault. Like he was dumb for not sitting on his porch all day, waiting. That made his blood boil a little. Not a lot, just enough to feel hot under his shirt. He didn't like being talked to like that. Nobody would. He opened his mouth to say something back, but stopped. Words wouldn't help. Not yet. Karen was too smug, too sure of herself. She thought she could brush him off, like he was a fly buzzing around her perfect roses. But Jake wasn't a fly. He was a guy with a missing package, and he wasn't going to just walk away and forget it. No way. He'd worked too hard for that console. Saved too long. Dreamed about it too much. Karen's attitude wasn't going to scare him off. He stepped back to his side of the street, leaning against his truck again. His mind was racing now, like a car speeding down a track. She's lying, he thought. She has to be. The garbage truck story was fake. He knew it. She knew it. But why lie? What was she hiding? Jake's eyes flicked to her house. Big windows. Fancy door. That gold mailbox shining like a trophy. Did she take his package inside? Was it sitting in there right now, next to her rose-scented candles and HOA rule books? The thought made his stomach flip. Jake rubbed his chin, thinking hard. He didn't have proof. Not yet. Just a feeling. A strong, twisty feeling in his gut that said Karen was up to no good. He couldn't march over and bang on her door, that'd make him look crazy. Neighbors would stare. Karen would yell. Maybe even call the cops and twist the story. She was good at that, twisting things. She'd done it before, like when she told everyone Mr. Thompson's dog dug up her yard, even though it was just a rabbit. No, Jake had to be smart. Smarter than her. He glanced up and down the street again. The kids were gone now, their bikes parked in driveways. The sky was darker, more purple than orange. Lights flicked on in houses, glowing through curtains. Jake's house stayed dark, he hadn't even gone inside yet. He was too stuck on this mystery. Too stuck on Karen's smirk. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and checked the tracking app one more time. Delivered at 1:47 p.m. That was hours ago. Plenty of time for someone to grab it. Plenty of time for Karen to sneak over. He shoved his phone back in his pocket and crossed his arms tighter. Okay, he thought. Let's think this through. If the mail guy left it on the porch, someone had to see it. Mr. Thompson didn't. Mrs. Garcia didn't. But Karen was right across the street. Her big window looked straight at his house. She could have watched the mail truck pull up. Could have seen the guy drop the box. Could have waited till nobody was around and, what? Taken it? Why would she do that? Jake frowned. Karen was weird, sure. Bossy, yeah. But stealing? That was big. That was bad. Then he remembered something. A little thing, but it stuck in his brain. Last week, Karen had yelled at him about his trash cans. They're too close to the curb, she'd barked, wagging her finger. Move them back, Jake, or I'll fine you. Jake had rolled his eyes and moved them, just to shut her up. But she'd been mad. Real mad. Over trash cans. Maybe she didn't like him. Maybe this was her way of getting back at him. Stealing his package to teach him a lesson. It sounded crazy, but with Karen? Crazy fit. Jake's heart beat faster. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Karen didn't just see his package, she took it. That smirk wasn't random. That sharp voice wasn't nothing. She was playing a game, and Jake was losing. For now. He wasn't going to let her win, though. No way. He'd find out the truth. He'd get his console back. But how? He needed a plan. A good one. Karen finished watering and coiled up her hose, still humming. She glanced at Jake one last time, her smirk fading into a frown. Then she marched inside, slamming her door loud enough for him to hear. The sound echoed down the street. Jake stood there, alone in the growing dark, his empty porch behind him. The tension was thick now, like fog you could feel. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And Jake was ready to figure it out. Jake wasn't the kind of guy who liked fighting. Nope. He didn't yell or throw punches or make a big scene. If someone cut him off in traffic, he'd just shrug and keep driving. If a kid kicked a ball into his yard, he'd toss it back with a smile. That was Jake, calm, cool, and nice. But he wasn't dumb. Not even a little. He might be quiet, but his brain was always working, like a motor humming under the hood of a car. And right now, that brain was telling him something big. Karen was trouble. After she gave him that sassy garbage truck answer, Jake didn't just sit there and pout. He didn't stomp his feet or cry about his missing gaming console. Nope. He got smart. He remembered something: his doorbell camera. He'd put it up last month because his buddy Tom said, "You never know who's sneaking around." Jake thought it was a little silly back then. Who'd sneak around a boring guy like him? But now, oh, he was so glad he listened to Tom. That camera was about to save the day. He ran inside his house, flipping on the lights. His little living room was messy: socks on the couch, a pizza box on the table, but he didn't care. He grabbed his phone off the kitchen counter and opened the camera app. His hands shook a tiny bit, not because he was scared, but because he was excited. Nervous excited. Like when you're about to open a birthday present and you hope it's something awesome. Come on, he mumbled, tapping the screen. The app loaded, and there it was, a list of videos from today. Every time someone walked by his porch, the camera recorded it. Smart little thing. Jake scrolled down to 1:47 p.m., the time his package was delivered. He hit play. The video started, all clear and bright. First, he saw the mail guy. A short man in a gray uniform, carrying Jake's brown box. The guy set it down by the door, nice and gentle, then walked back to his truck and drove off. Jake nodded. Okay, it was here, he said to himself. The porch looked normal: sun shining, birds chirping in the background. Nothing weird. Yet. He kept watching. The next video popped up: 2:15 p.m. Jake leaned closer to his phone, squinting. And then, there she was. Karen. Clear as day, like a character in a movie. She was wearing her bright pink tracksuit, the one she always wore when she bossed people around. It was so pink it hurt your eyes, like bubblegum mixed with a highlighter. She walked up Jake's steps, slow and sneaky, looking left and right. Her head turned fast, like she was checking for spies. Then she bent down, grabbed the package, Jake's package, and tucked it under her arm. She didn't even hesitate. She spun around, strutted back across the street, and disappeared into her house like she'd just won a prize at the fair. Jake's jaw dropped. Literally. His mouth fell open so wide you could have tossed a grape in there. He blinked at the screen, then hit rewind. He watched it again. And again. Pink tracksuit. Sneaky steps. Package gone. Every time, it was the same. Karen took it. She stole it. This wasn't just some little neighbor fight over loud music or tall grass. This was stealing, real, honest to goodness stealing. Like a robber in a cartoon, but with worse clothes. He sat back on his couch, still holding his phone. His heart was thumping loud, like a drum in his chest. No way, he whispered. She really did it? He couldn't believe it at first. Karen was annoying, sure. She'd yell about trash cans or dog poop or whatever bugged her that day. But taking his stuff? That was a whole new kind of bad. Jake's gaming console, the thing he'd saved up for months, was in her house right now. Probably sitting on her fancy kitchen table, next to her rose vases and HOA papers. The thought made him mad. Quiet mad, but mad. He could have jumped up right then. Could have marched across the street, banged on her door, and shouted, "Give me my package back, you thief." He pictured it: Karen opening the door, her smirk falling off her face, her eyes going wide. He'd hold up his phone and say, "I've got you on video." Oh, that'd feel good. Really good. He even stood up, his fists clenched, ready to go. But then he stopped. He took a big breath and sat back down. Nope. That wasn't the way. Not yet. Jake was smart, remember. He didn't want to just yell and fight. Karen was tricky. She'd twist it around, make up some story, maybe even cry and say he was mean. She was good at playing the victim. She'd done it before with other neighbors. No, Jake had to be better. Smarter. He had proof now, the video, but he needed more. He needed a plan. A super good plan to catch her for real and make sure she couldn't wiggle out of it. He tapped his phone and saved the video. Download, he said out loud, watching the little bar fill up. Done. Now it was safe. Even if his phone broke or got lost, that video wasn't going anywhere. It was his golden ticket, his big win. But he didn't stop there. Jake grabbed his laptop from his bedroom buried under a pile of shirts and plopped it on the kitchen table. He turned it on, the screen glowing bright. Okay, he said to himself. Let's dig. Digging meant finding stuff out. Jake wasn't just going to sit there with one video and call it a day. He wanted to know more. Why did Karen take it? What was she doing with it? Was this the first time she'd stolen something? His fingers flew over the keyboard, clicking and typing. First, he checked the neighborhood group online. It was a page where people posted stuff like, lost cat, or who's got a lawnmower I can borrow. Jake scrolled through, looking for clues. And guess what? He found something. Not a big thing, but a little thing. A post from 2 months ago. Mrs. Garcia, the nice cookie lady, wrote, "Hey, did anyone see my flower pot? It was on my porch yesterday, and now it's gone." Jake remembered that pot, bright blue with yellow daisies painted on it. Mrs. Garcia loved it. Nobody answered her post back then. Just a few "sorry, didn't see it" comments. But now Jake wondered. Karen lived right by Mrs. Garcia too. Could she have taken that pot? It was a stretch, but it made his brain tingle. Maybe Karen wasn't just nosy, maybe she was a sneak. He kept scrolling. Another post, 3 weeks ago. Mr. Thompson said, "Someone took my newspaper this morning." Weird. Again, nobody saw anything. Jake leaned back, rubbing his eyes. A flower pot. A newspaper. His package. All little things, but they added up. Like puzzle pieces clicking together. Karen was always around, always watching. Maybe she didn't just boss people, maybe she took stuff too. Jake's stomach flipped. This was bigger than he thought. He closed the laptop and stood up, pacing his tiny kitchen. His sneakers squeaked on the floor. Okay, he muttered. She took it? I've got the video. But what's she doing with it? He pictured Karen in her house. Was she opening his package right now? Laughing at his gaming console? Or hiding it somewhere, like under her couch? He didn't know. But he knew one thing, every step she took was trouble. Trouble for her. She didn't realize it yet, but she was digging her own grave. A big, messy hole she couldn't climb out of. Jake stopped pacing and grinned a little. Not a happy grin, a sneaky one. He had the video. He had ideas. And he wasn't done digging. Karen thought she was smart, strutting off with his package like a winner. But Jake was smarter. He'd watch. He'd wait. He'd find more. Little by little, he'd build his case. And when the time was right, boom. She'd be caught. The night got darker outside. Stars popped out in the sky, twinkling over the quiet street. Karen's house was dark too, lights off, curtains shut. She was in there, probably thinking she'd gotten away with it. But Jake's house glowed soft and warm. He sat back down, phone in hand, replaying that video one more time. Pink tracksuit. Sneaky steps. Package gone. He shook his head, almost laughing. "Oh, Karen," he whispered. "You messed with the wrong guy. What would you do if you caught someone red-handed like that? Would you run over and yell? Tell a friend? Call the cops?" Jake had his own way, and it was just getting started. Keep watching, I promise it's worth it. This story's about to get wilder. The next morning came fast. The sun popped up, bright and happy, shining over the little neighborhood. Birds chirped in the trees, and a soft breeze made the grass wiggle. Jake woke up early, his head buzzing with ideas. He'd barely slept. All night, he kept thinking about that video, Karen in her pink tracksuit, stealing his package like it was no big deal. He watched it over and over, making sure it was real. It was. Every time, there she was, sneaking off with his gaming console. His proof. His win. He rolled out of bed, still in his pajamas, old sweatpants and a wrinkled shirt. He rubbed his eyes and shuffled to the kitchen. Coffee. He needed coffee. The pot hissed and bubbled as it brewed, filling the room with a warm smell. Jake grabbed a mug, poured it full, and took a big sip. Okay, he said to himself, today's the day. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad anymore, not the yelling kind of mad, anyway. He was ready. Ready to face Karen. Ready to show her she couldn't mess with him and get away with it. He peeked out his window. There she was, Karen. Already outside, like she couldn't wait to boss someone around. She stood in her front yard, hands on her hips, yelling at some poor kid with a skateboard. The kid was little, maybe 10 years old, with floppy hair and a red shirt. His skateboard was scratched up, but he loved it. Karen didn't. You can't ride that here, she shouted, her voice loud and sharp. This is a quiet street. Take it somewhere else, or I'll tell your mom. The kid's face turned pink. He grabbed his board and ran off, sneakers slapping the pavement. Karen smirked, pleased with herself. Same old Karen, always picking on someone. Jake shook his head. That was it. No more waiting. He set his coffee mug down with a clink and grabbed his laptop off the table. It was still open from last night, the video ready to go. He tucked it under his arm, took a deep breath, and headed outside. The air was cool on his face, but he didn't feel it. His heart was pumping, steady and strong. He wasn't nervous now, he was sure. Sure of what he had. Sure of what he'd say. This was his moment. He walked across the street, his sneakers quiet on the asphalt. Karen didn't see him coming at first. She was too busy brushing dirt off her roses, muttering to herself about kids these days. Her pink sweatshirt glowed in the sunlight, just like in the video. Jake stopped a few steps away, right on her perfectly mowed lawn. He cleared his throat. Hey, Karen, he said, calm as could be. His voice was soft but firm, like he was asking her to borrow a cup of sugar. We need to talk about my package. Karen froze for a second, her hand still on a rose. Then she turned her head, slow and annoyed, like Jake was a bug she wanted to swat. Her eyes rolled so hard they almost disappeared. Oh, you again, she groaned, standing up straight. I told you, Jake, I don't know anything about your stupid box. Stop bothering me, or I'll call the HOA. They'll fine you for harassing me. Her voice was loud, bossy, dripping with that smug tone she always used. She crossed her arms and stared at him, daring him to keep talking. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't yell back. He just stood there, holding his laptop, a tiny smile tugging at his lips. Okay, Karen, he said, still calm. Let's see about that. He flipped open the laptop with one hand like a cowboy pulling out a gun in an old movie. The screen lit up bright, cutting through the morning light. Karen squinted, confused. What's that? She snapped. What are you doing? She took a step closer, her nose wrinkling like she smelled something bad. Jake didn't answer with words. He answered with action. He turned the laptop so she could see the screen, and he hit play. The video started, loud and clear. There it was, Jake's porch, sunny and quiet. The mail guy dropping off the package. Then bam, Karen. In her bright pink tracksuit, waltzing up the steps like she owned the place. She looked left, looked right, sneaky as a fox. Her hands grabbed the box, Jake's box, and she strutted off, head high, like she'd just won a gold medal. The video looped back to the start, playing again. Pink tracksuit. Sneaky steps. Package gone. Karen's face changed fast. Real fast. 1 second, she was smirking, all high and mighty. The next, her eyes went wide, and her mouth dropped open. Her cheeks, usually pink from too much makeup, turned white. Ghost white. Like all the color ran away and hid. She blinked at the screen, then at Jake, then back at the screen. What is that? She stuttered, her voice shaky now. Where'd you get that? She pointed at the laptop, her finger trembling just a little. Jake tilted his head, still calm. That's you, Karen, he said, simple and slow. Stealing my package. Yesterday. Caught you on my doorbell camera. He tapped the side of the laptop, like it was his best friend. Pretty cool, huh? Shows everything. Clear as day. He let the video play again, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the quiet yard. Karen's jaw flapped, like a fish pulled out of water. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came out. For once, the HOA queen was speechless. Totally, completely quiet. She took a step back, her hands dropping to her sides. That's not me, she finally blurted, but it sounded weak. Fake. Like even she didn't believe it. Her eyes darted around, looking for a way out. You edited that? You made it up, she shouted, pointing at Jake now. Her voice was loud again, but it cracked, like a broken toy. She was panicking. Jake could see it, her hands shaking, her face pale, her smirk gone. Jake shook his head. Nope, he said. It's real. And I've got it saved. Can't fake a camera, Karen. He closed the laptop with a soft click and tucked it under his arm again. He took a step closer, his voice still steady, still calm. Oh, and one more thing. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Karen stared at him, her breath quick and shallow. I called the cops, Jake said, leaning in just a little. Turns out, stealing a package worth over $500. That's a felony. Big trouble. You're in big trouble now. The word felony hit her like a brick. Her mouth flapped again, open, shut, like she couldn't figure out what to do. A felony wasn't just a little oops. It was a crime. A serious one. Jail serious. Jake had looked it up last night, after he saved the video. His gaming console cost $550 with tax. Stealing something that expensive wasn't a slap on the wrist, it was a real deal problem. And Karen? She'd walked right into it, bold as brass, thinking she'd never get caught. Her eyes went huge, like saucers. Cops, she squeaked, her voice tiny now. You called the cops. She stumbled back another step, tripping over her own hose. It clattered to the ground, and she almost fell, catching herself on her rose bush. A thorn pricked her hand, and she yelped, but she didn't even notice. She was too busy staring at Jake, her brain spinning. You can't do that, she shouted, but it sounded more like a plea. I didn't mean. I wasn't. It's just a box. Jake raised an eyebrow. Just a box, he said. It's my box, Karen. I worked for it. Saved for months. And you took it? That's stealing. That's a felony. He kept his voice low, but every word was sharp, like a little arrow hitting its mark. Karen's face crumpled. No more yelling. No more smirking. She looked small now, smaller than Jake had ever seen her. The HOA queen, the big boss of the street, was shrinking right in front of him. She opened her mouth again, trying to talk. I was just, she started, but stopped. What could she say? The video showed everything. She couldn't lie her way out. Couldn't blame the garbage truck. Couldn't call the HOA to save her. She was caught red-handed, pink tracksuit caught. Her hands twisted together, nervous and twitchy. Jake, listen, she said, her voice wobbly. We can fix this. I'll give it back. It's inside. I didn't even open it. She waved toward her house, desperate now. Jake didn't move. He just watched her, letting her squirm. Too late for that, he said. Cops are on their way. You should have thought about that before you took it. He pointed at her house, where his package was hiding. You don't get to steal and then say sorry when you're caught. That's not how it works. His words were simple, but they hit hard. Karen's shoulders slumped. She looked at the ground, then at Jake, then at the street like she wanted to run but knew she couldn't. And then, right on cue, a sound broke the quiet. A low rumble. Tires on pavement. Jake turned his head, and there it was, a police car, rolling slow down the street. Its lights weren't flashing, but it didn't need to. Everyone knew what it was. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes wild. No, she whispered, so soft Jake barely heard it. No, no, no. The car stopped in front of her house, and two officers stepped out, tall guys in blue uniforms, with badges that gleamed in the sun. Jake stepped back, giving them room. Karen's mouth flapped one last time, but nothing came out. She was done. Caught. Speechless. The HOA queen's crown was falling off, and Jake? He stood there, calm and quiet, knowing he'd won. The big reveal was over, and the truth was out bright as day, just like that video. The police car rolled up slow and steady, like a big cat sneaking through the grass. It didn't need sirens or flashing lights, everyone knew what it meant. Trouble. Big trouble. It stopped right in front of Karen's house, the tires crunching on the pavement. The doors popped open, and two cops stepped out. They were tall, with blue uniforms that looked crisp and clean. One had a shiny badge pinned to his chest, and the other carried a little notebook. They walked toward Jake and Karen, their boots thumping on the ground. It hadn't even been an hour since Jake called them, just minutes, really, but they were here fast. Ready to fix this mess. Karen stood there, still pale, her hands twisting together like she didn't know what to do with them. Her pink tracksuit looked silly now, not bossy, just loud and out of place. She saw the cops coming, and her eyes went wide again, darting back and forth like a scared bunny. "Wait," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "Wait, wait, wait. This is all a big mistake." Her voice was high and squeaky, not sharp like before. She didn't sound like the HOA queen anymore. She sounded like a kid caught with candy she wasn't supposed to have. The cop stopped a few steps away. The one with the badge, Officer Mike, his name tag said, tilted his head. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deep but calm. He looked at Jake, then at Karen, then back at Jake. His eyes were serious, like he could see right through any lies. The other cop, Officer Sam, flipped open his notebook and clicked a pen, ready to write stuff down. They weren't mad or yelling, they were just doing their job. But that made Karen more nervous. She started talking fast, words tumbling out like marbles spilling from a bag. "I didn't steal anything," she blurted, pointing at Jake. "I was just holding it for him." "Yeah, that's it. I saw the package on his porch, and I thought, oh, Jake's not home, I'll keep it safe. I was being a good neighbor." She nodded hard, like she was trying to convince herself to. "I didn't mean to keep it. I was going to give it back. Honest." Her hands waved around, and her voice got louder, like she thought yelling would make it true. Jake stayed quiet, his laptop still under his arm. He didn't need to say much, the video said it all. But he couldn't help a tiny smile. Karen's story was wild. Crazy wild. Holding it for him? Really? She didn't knock on his door. Didn't call him. Didn't leave a note. She just took it and strutted off like a sneaky cat with a fish. Jake knew it, and the cops would too. He waited, letting her talk herself into a corner. Officer Mike raised an eyebrow. "Holding it for him," he said, slow and steady. "That's what you're saying?" He glanced at Jake, like he was checking if that made sense. Jake shook his head, just a little. "Nope," he said, simple and clear. "She didn't tell me anything. She just took it. I've got proof." He lifted the laptop a bit, showing it off. "Video from my doorbell camera. Shows her taking it yesterday." Karen's face twisted. "That's not true," she snapped, but her voice wobbled. "He's lying. That video's fake." She pointed at Jake again, her fingers shaking. "You can't trust him. He's just mad about some dumb box." She crossed her arms, trying to look tough, but it didn't work. Her eyes kept flicking to the cops, scared and jumpy. Officer Sam stepped forward, pen ready. "Let's see this video," he said, nodding at Jake. "If you've got proof, we need to look." Jake didn't hesitate. He flipped open the laptop again, the screen glowing in the morning sun. He hit play, and there it was, Karen in her pink tracksuit, sneaking up his porch steps, grabbing the package, and walking off. The sound of her shoes on the wood echoed a little, loud enough for everyone to hear. The cops leaned in, watching close. Karen peeked too, even though she didn't want to. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again like she couldn't decide what to say. The video ended, and Officer Mike straightened up. "That's pretty clear," he said, looking at Karen. "That's you, right? Taking the package." His voice wasn't mean, just straight. Like he was asking if the sky was blue. Karen's cheeks went red now, not white. I, she stammered, then stopped. She couldn't argue with her own face on the screen. It was her. No faking that. Jake pulled out his phone next. "Here's the receipt," he said, showing the cops a picture he'd saved. "It's a gaming console. Cost me $550 with tax. I bought it online, saved up for months. Officer Sam took the phone, squinting at the screen. Yep, he said, handing it back. That's over $500. That makes it felony theft. He wrote something in his notebook, his pen scratching fast. Karen's knees wobbled. Felony, she squeaked, grabbing her rose bush for balance. No, no, no. It's not a felony. It's just a box. I didn't hurt anybody. She waved her hands again, desperate. I'll give it back right now. It's inside. Let me get it. She turned toward her house, like she was going to run in and fix everything. Officer Mike held up a hand. Hold on, he said, firm but not loud. You don't just take something and give it back when you're caught. That's not how it works. We've got the video. We've got the receipt. The law's clear, stealing over $500 is a felony. You're coming with us. He reached for his belt, and out came the handcuffs. They glinted in the sun, shiny and silver, clicking as he opened them. Karen's eyes went huge. Handcuffs, she gasped. No way. You can't do this. I'm in the HOA. I'm a good person. She backed up, bumping into her gold mailbox. It wobbled a little, but she didn't notice. She was too busy freaking out. Officer Sam stepped closer, calm as ever. Ma'am, turn around, he said. Hands behind your back. Let's make this easy. His voice was gentle, like he was talking to a kid, but Karen didn't listen. She kept shaking her head, her hair bouncing. No, 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 she yelled. This is crazy. But the cops didn't budge. They'd heard wild stories before, this was just another one. Officer Mike took her arm, gentle but strong, and turned her around. The handcuffs clicked shut, snap, snap around her wrists. Karen yelped, like it hurt, but it didn't. She was just shocked. Her perfect little world, the roses, the gold mailbox, the HOA rules, was falling apart. Crashing down like a tower of blocks knocked over by a big wind. Jake watched, quiet and still. He didn't cheer or laugh. He just stood there, holding his laptop, feeling good. Not mean good, but fair good. Justice good. Karen had taken his package, lied about it, smirked about it. Now she was caught. The cops led her to the car, one on each side. She kept talking, fast and loud. This is a mistake. I'll sue you. I'll call my lawyer. But her voice got softer as they walked away, fading into mumbles. The car door opened, and they helped her in, pink tracksuit and all. The door shut with a thud. Neighbors started peeking out. Curtains twitched. Faces pressed against windows. Mrs. Garcia poked her head out her door, her apron still on. Mr. Thompson leaned on his broom, squinting across the street. Even the skateboard kid came back, hiding behind a tree, his eyes big. They all saw it: Karen, the bossy lady who yelled at everyone, getting taken away. Whispers floated through the air. What happened? Did she do something? Is that Jake's package thing? The street wasn't quiet anymore, it was buzzing. Officer Mike walked back to Jake. We'll need that video, he said. Can you send it to us? Jake nodded fast. Yeah, sure, he said, pulling out his phone. I've got it saved. I'll email it right now. He tapped the screen, sent the file, and showed the cop. Done. Officer Mike nodded. Good. And the package, it's still in her house. Jake shrugged. She said it's inside. I didn't see it yet. The cop turned to Officer Sam, who was by the car. Let's check, he called. They walked to Karen's front door, big and fancy, painted green. It wasn't locked. Officer Sam pushed it open and stepped inside, his boots loud on her shiny floor. Jake waited outside, watching. A minute later, Sam came back, holding it, the brown box. Jake's package, still taped up, still with his name on it. Found it, Sam said, lifting it up. Right on her living room table, like she was keeping it. He handed it to Jake, and Jake's heart jumped. There it was, his gaming console. Safe. Back where it belonged. Jake took the box, hugging it a little. Thanks, he said, grinning at the cop. No problem, Sam replied. We'll take it from here. She's got a date with the station. He tipped his hat a little wave and walked back to the car. Jake stepped off Karen's lawn, package in his arms, and watched as the police car pulled away. Karen's face was in the window, pale and small, staring out. Then she was gone, down the street, out of sight. The neighbors kept whispering. Mrs. Garcia shuffled over, her slippers flapping. "Jake, what happened?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake smiled. "She took my package," he said. "I caught her on video. Cops took her away." Mrs. Garcia's mouth opened. "Oh my. That's wild." She shook her head, then patted his arm. "Good for you, Jake. You're a smart boy." She shuffled back home, still muttering. The next day, the HOA sent out a memo. It came in everyone's mailbox, a little white paper with black letters. Jake pulled his out and read it, sitting on his porch. "New rules," it said. "No stealing." Duh. That was it. Short and simple. Jake laughed out loud, the sound bouncing off his house. "Duh," he repeated, shaking his head. Even the HOA knew Karen messed up big. He opened his package that night. The gaming console was perfect, shiny, new, just like he'd dreamed. He hooked it up to his TV, grabbed the controller, and played. Cars zoomed on the screen, and he grinned ear to ear. No Karen. No trouble. Just fun. Sometimes, the quiet guy wins. And Jake? He won big. Jake leaned back on his couch, controller in his hands, the glow of the TV lighting up his little living room. The racing game roared through his speakers, vroom, vroom, as cars sped around a twisty track. His thumbs mashed the buttons, steering a bright red car past a sharp turn. He grinned so big his cheeks hurt. This was it. This was why he'd saved all those months, skipping snacks and movie nights. His gaming console was finally his again, safe and sound, right where it belonged. No more Karen. No more worries. Just fun. Outside, the night was dark and quiet. Stars twinkled high above the neighborhood, and a little breeze snuck through his open window, rustling the curtains. The pizza box from yesterday still sat on the table, but Jake didn't care about the mess. He was too happy. Every time his car zoomed past another player on the screen, he felt a little burst of victory. "Take that," he said out loud, laughing to himself. It wasn't just a win in the game, it was a win over Karen. A big, fat, awesome win. He played for hours, losing track of time. The clock on his wall ticked past 9, then 10, then 11. He didn't notice. All he saw was the track, the cars, the finish line. Every lap felt like a prize, like he was racing away all the stress from the day before. Karen's smirk, her sharp voice, her pink tracksuit, all of it faded away. Poof. Gone. Jake was the king of his couch now, and nobody could take that from him. When he finally turned off the game, his eyes were tired but happy. He stretched his arms up high, cracking his knuckles, and stood up. The box his console came in was still on the floor, tape ripped off, bubble wrap spilling out. He picked it up and hugged it one more time just because. "You're mine," he whispered, like it was a puppy he'd rescued. Then he tossed it by the trash can. Time to clean up tomorrow. Tonight was for winning. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again. Not loud buzzing, like bees, but quiet buzzing, like whispers and giggles. Jake stepped outside to grab his mail, still in his pajamas, those same old sweatpants and wrinkled shirt. The sun was up, warm and bright, making the lawns glow green. He opened his mailbox and pulled out that little white memo from the HOA. New rules. No stealing. Duh. He read it again, chuckling. It was so silly, but so perfect. Like even the HOA couldn't believe Karen did something so dumb. As he turned to go back inside, he saw Mrs. Garcia waving from her porch. She had a plate of cookies in her hands, chocolate chip, his favorite. "Jake," she called, her voice sweet and soft. "Come here a minute." Jake smiled and walked over, the grass tickling his bare feet. "Hey, Mrs. Garcia," he said, stopping by her steps. "What's up?" She held out the plate, her eyes twinkling. "These are for you," she said. "I heard what happened with Karen. You're a hero, Jake. A smart, quiet hero." She laughed, and Jake's cheeks went a little pink. Ah, thanks, he said, taking a cookie. It was warm and gooey, fresh from the oven. He took a big bite and nodded. These are awesome. But I'm not a hero, just got my stuff back. Mrs. Garcia shook her head. No, no, she said. You stood up to her. Nobody does that. She's been bossing us around forever, yelling about flowers, trash, everything. And now she's gone. She clapped her hands, like it was a party. Good riddance. Jake laughed, crumbs falling from his mouth. Yeah, he said. Guess she won't be bugging us for a while. Mrs. Garcia leaned in, lowering her voice. You know, she said, I think she took my flower pot too. That blue one with daisies. Never found it, but I bet it's in her house somewhere. Jake's eyes widened. Really, he said. That's nuts. She nodded. Yep. She's sneaky. But you caught her. Good job, Jake. She patted his arm and shuffled back inside, leaving him with the cookies. Jake munched another one, thinking. Karen took a flower pot. And maybe Mr. Thompson's newspaper too? He remembered those posts online. Little things, but they added up. She wasn't just nosy, she was a thief. A sneaky, smirky thief. He shook his head, amazed. How did she think she'd get away with it? Especially with his package $5.50 worth of stuff. Crazy. He walked back home, cookies in hand, and saw Mr. Thompson sweeping his driveway. The old man waved his broom. Jake, he called. Heard you got Karen in trouble. Nice work. Jake grinned and crossed the street. Yeah, he said. She took my package. Had her on video. Mr. Thompson's bushy eyebrows shot up. Video? Huh? That's fancy. Wish I had that when she nabbed my paper. He laughed, a scratchy, happy sound. She's been a pest too long. Glad someone showed her up. Jake nodded. She's with the cops now, he said. Felony theft. Big deal. Mr. Thompson whistled. Felony? Woo, that's serious. Handcuffs and all. Jake nodded again. Yep. Took her away yesterday. Mr. Thompson slapped his knee. Well, I'll be quiet, Jake, taking down the HOA queen. You're a legend, kid. He swept his broom harder, still chuckling as Jake waved and headed back. The skateboard kid was out too, rolling slow down the street. He saw Jake and stopped, kicking his board up. Hey, man, he said, his voice shy. You really get Karen arrested? Jake shrugged. Kinda, he said. She stole my stuff. Cops took her. The kid's eyes got big. Whoa. She yelled at me yesterday about my board. She's mean. Jake laughed. Yeah, she's gone now. Skate all you want. The kid grinned, showing a missing tooth. Cool. You're awesome. He hopped on his board and zoomed off, wheels rattling. Jake stood on his porch, watching the kid go. The neighborhood felt different today. Lighter. Happier. No Karen yelling. No sharp voice cutting through the air. Just kids playing, neighbors smiling, and cookies from Mrs. Garcia. He took another bite, crumbs falling on his shirt, and went inside. Time to play more games. Later that day, he hooked up his console again. The TV flickered on, and the racing game started up. Vroom, vroom. He sank into the couch, controller in hand, and lost himself in the fun. Every lap, every win, felt like a little cheer for justice. Karen thought she could take his stuff and smirk about it. Nope. Not this time. Jake was quiet, but he wasn't weak. He'd shown her that. The HOA memo sat on his table, next to the cookie plate. No stealing. Duh. He laughed every time he read it. So simple, so funny. The HOA didn't even know what to say, they just wrote the obvious. Jake pictured them sitting in a meeting, scratching their heads. Karen stole stuff. Tell everyone not to do that. It was dumb, but it worked. Nobody would forget this. Days passed, and the buzz died down. The police kept Karen for a bit. Jake heard she'd have to go to court. Felony theft wasn't a quick fix. She might get a fine, or jail, or both. He didn't know for sure, and he didn't really care. She was gone, his console was back, and that was enough. Neighbors stopped whispering, but they didn't stop smiling at Jake. Every time he walked outside, someone waved. "Hey, Jake. Good job, Jake. You're the man." He'd wave back, a little shy, but proud. One afternoon, Mrs. Garcia knocked on his door. She had a big grin and a little blue pot in her hands, yellow daisies painted on it. "Look," she said, holding it up. "The cops found it in Karen's garage." "My flower pot." Jake's mouth dropped. "No way," he said. "She really took it?" Mrs. Garcia nodded. "Yep. And some other stuff, newspapers, a garden gnome, even a kid's kite. She's a pack rat." They both laughed, loud and long. Karen wasn't just a thief, she was a collector of random junk. Jake took the pot and set it on his porch. "Guess she won't need it now," he said. Mrs. Garcia winked. "Nope. Thanks to you." She hugged him quick and shuffled off, humming a happy tune. Jake watched her go, then went back to his game. The neighborhood was back to normal, better than normal. No HOA queen. No stolen stuff. Just peace. Jake played his console every night that week. Racing games, adventure games, even a silly one with dancing chickens. He didn't care, he loved it all. Every button he pressed, every level he beat, was a reminder, he'd won. Not with yelling or fighting, but with smarts. With that little camera. With a calm voice and a big truth. Sometimes, the quiet guy doesn't just sit there. Sometimes, he stands up, catches the bad guy, and gets the prize. The street stayed quiet after that. Kids rode bikes. Dogs barked. Birds sang. Karen's house sat empty, her roses wilting, her gold mailbox getting dull. Nobody missed her. Jake kept his console close, his cookies closer, and his neighbors happiest of all. Justice was served, simple and sweet, and the quiet guy smiled biggest. So here's the thing, people like Karen think they can push everyone around. They walk around all big and loud, acting like they're the boss of the world. Karen was like that, strutting in her pink tracksuit, yelling at kids, stealing packages, and smirking like nobody could stop her. She thought she was untouchable. Like a queen on a throne, ruling the neighborhood with her sharp voice and nosy eyes. She'd boss you about your grass, your trash, your dog, anything she didn't like. And most people? They just shrugged and let her. They'd roll their eyes, whisper to their friends, but never say a word to her face. Karen got used to that. She thought it'd always be that way. But then Jake came along. Quiet Jake. Regular Jake. The guy who fixed cars and played video games and didn't make a fuss. Karen never saw him coming. She figured he was just another pushover, someone she could mess with and walk away laughing. She took his package, thinking, he won't do anything. He's too quiet. Too boring. Oh, how wrong she was. Jake didn't yell or fight or bang on her door like some wild superhero. Nope. He did something better. Something smarter. He used the truth. Just the plain, simple truth caught on his little doorbell camera. And that truth? It was stronger than all of Karen's smirks and lies put together. Think about it. Jake didn't need to be loud. He didn't need fists or fancy words. He had a video, a calm voice, and a plan. That was enough. More than enough. He showed it to Karen, then to the cops, and boom, her whole world flipped upside down. Handcuffs clicked, the police car rolled away, and Karen's perfect little kingdom crashed like a toy house in a storm. All because Jake didn't let her push him around. He pushed back not with anger, but with smarts. That's the cool part. The real power wasn't in shouting or stomping. It was in being clever. In knowing what's right and proving it. Maybe that's the big lesson here. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to win. You don't have to scream or cry or make a big show. Sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones who watch, who think, who wait, they're the strongest. Karen never expected that. She thought loud meant strong. She thought bossy meant unbeatable. But Jake showed her, quiet can be strong too. Smart can be stronger. And the truth? Oh, the truth is the strongest thing of all. It's like a superhero power nobody sees coming. Picture it like this, Karen was a big bulldozer, rumbling around, knocking stuff over. She'd roll through the neighborhood, flattening anything in her way: Jake's package, Mrs. Garcia's flower pot, Mr. Thompson's newspaper. She didn't care who she squashed, as long as she got what she wanted. But Jake? He was a tiny seed. Small, quiet, easy to miss. You'd step right over him and not even notice. But that seed grew slow and steady into something tough. Something that cracked the bulldozer's wheels and stopped it cold. That's what smarts can do. That's what truth can do. It doesn't need to yell. It just grows, and then it wins. What if Jake hadn't fought back? What if he just shrugged and said, "Oh well, it's gone"? Karen would have kept going. She'd have taken more stuff, maybe your stuff, or your friend's stuff. She'd have kept bossing everyone, smirking all the way. But Jake didn't let that happen. He stood up, not with a big roar, but with a little camera and a steady heart. And now the neighborhood's better. Kids can skate. Dogs can bark. Nobody's peeking out windows, scared of her sharp voice. Jake made that happen. Quiet Jake. Smart Jake. So here's something to think about: who's the strong one in your life? Is it the loud kid who talks over everybody? The bossy one who always gets their way? Or is it the quiet one, the one who listens, who watches, who thinks before they move? Maybe real power isn't about being loud at all. Maybe it's about being smart. About knowing when to wait, when to act, and how to use what you've got. Jake had a camera and a brain. That was it. And it was enough to take down a bulldozer like Karen. Let's rewind a bit. Think about Karen before all this. She wasn't always a thief, right? She was just nosy. Bossy. Annoying. She'd march around, telling people what to do, and they'd groan but listen. Why? Because she was loud. Because she acted big. People let her get away with little things: yelling, complaining, making rules. And little by little, she got bolder. She started taking stuff. A flower pot here. A newspaper there. Jake's package. She pushed and pushed, thinking nobody'd push back. She got cocky. Too cocky. And that's when she tripped right into Jake's trap. Now think about Jake. He wasn't loud. He didn't strut. He fixed cars, played games, kept to himself. Nobody thought, "Oh, Jake's a hero." Not at first. He was just there. Quiet. Normal. But inside, he had something special. Not muscles or a megaphone, just patience. And smarts. When Karen took his package, he didn't explode. He didn't run around screaming. He checked his camera. He saved the video. He called the cops. Step by step, calm and cool, he built his win. That's power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight to shine. What's that mean for you? Maybe you're quiet too. Maybe you don't like yelling or fighting. Maybe you feel small sometimes, like nobody sees you. But guess what? You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be big to matter. You can be like Jake. Watch, think, use what you've got. A camera. A good idea. A true story. That's enough to change things. Enough to stop a bully. Enough to fix what's wrong. You don't need to roar like a lion. You can whisper like a breeze and still move mountains. Karen learned that the hard way. She's not smirking now. No pink tracksuit strutting down the street. No sharp voice bossing kids around. She's with the cops, facing a felony, big trouble for a big mistake. Did she get what she deserved? That's up to you to decide. Some might say, yeah, she stole, she pays. Others might say, poor Karen, she messed up bad. What do you think? Was it fair? Did Jake do the right thing? Drop your answer below, I wanna know. But here's the cool part: Jake didn't just win for himself. He won for everybody. Mrs. Garcia got her flower pot back. Mr. Thompson's not missing papers. The skateboard kid can roll free. The neighborhood's happier, quieter, better, all because one guy didn't let a bully win. That's inspiring, right? One small push, one smart move, and everything changes. Maybe you can do that too. Maybe next time someone's mean or sneaky, you'll be the Jake: quiet, smart, unstoppable. So yeah, people like Karen think they're the kings and queens. They push and shove and take what they want. But they never expect the quiet ones to push back. Jake didn't yell or fight, he just used the truth, and that was enough. Maybe the real power isn't in being loud. Maybe it's in being smart. In being brave in your own way. Think about that next time you're mad or scared or stuck. You don't have to scream. You just have to be you, clever, calm, true. What do you think? Did Karen get what she deserved? Was Jake the hero we all need? Let me know below. I love hearing from you. And if you like this story, give it a thumbs up. It's wild, it's fun, and it's all about the little guy winning big. See you in the next one. Bye for now.